Welcome to this edition of Head to Head. I'm your host, Cam McKinney, and this is episode number 291. And on this episode, I'm talking about the state of the teams that faced off in the Super Bowl, the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. Coming into this NFL season, many believe that there would be a Super Bowl rematch between the Chiefs and the Eagles, and while that remains a possibility, it doesn't seem likely as both teams are going through recent struggles. Let's start with the Kansas City Chiefs, whose biggest issue is glaring to anyone with a pulse. They lack a consistent wide receiver you can depend on from week to week, and that's different than an elite one like Tyreek Hill. They don't have anyone who you know what you're going to get from week to week. Tom Brady, for example, had a star receiver in Randy Moss, but he also had dependable wide receivers like Wes Welker, Julian Edelman, Danny Amendola, who may be on paper Hall of Famers, at least two of them in Welker and Edelman, but really they were elevated by the quarterback. And right now, Patrick Mahomes does not have that level of wide receiver who's consistent. Aaron Rodgers with the Packers had his versions of dependable receivers who were not stars. Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb, and James Jones. Patrick Mahomes does not have that. He doesn't need Justin Jefferson. The Kansas City Chiefs don't need an elite playmaker. They just need wide receivers who you can depend on week from week, and right now they just don't have it, and it's their biggest issue. They have big drops and big moments. All that Mahomes has right now is his star tight end Travis Kelce, who is elite, but clearly they need another playmaker. This season is not even over, and Mahomes has already tied a career high with 13 interceptions. It feels like the Chiefs are taking their star quarterback for granted. They believe he can win with no matter what's around him, and I do agree with that to a certain degree. He can make the playoffs no matter who his wide receivers are, but can they win the Super Bowl with this quality of wide receiver? Absolutely not. Yes, I hear all the time about how the Chiefs have an improved defense, but a team like this is going to win and lose by the play of their elite quarterback. It's like when the Colts had Peyton Manning. They relied on Peyton Manning. That's where the Kansas City Chiefs are right now. They need Patrick Mahomes to play like Patrick Mahomes. Now, he's playing really well this season, but he's not an MVP candidate, and it's really because of the lack of weapons around him. And looking back at this past offseason, the guy they really should have targeted was DeAndre Hopkins. That would have been a match made in heaven. Now, DeAndre Hopkins was once a clear number one wide receiver. He is in somewhat of a decline, but he's still way better than anyone on the Kansas City Chiefs. If you have DeAndre Hopkins and Travis Kelce, I believe that's enough for the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl, but they don't have that. Instead, they have unproven guys who drop balls in the biggest moments of games, and we can blame the refs all we want for some of this, but it's ridiculous what these wide receivers are doing to ruin Patrick Mahomes' chances of winning the Super Bowl. The franchise, the organization, the Kansas City Chiefs are letting down their star quarterback. In this offseason, you have to think they're going to react. They're going to try to go get him a clear number one wide receiver. There's all this talk about T. Higgins' future with the Cincinnati Bengals. I would have to imagine the Kansas City Chiefs would have to be in on a wide receiver like that. I mean, that guy is just out there making amazing plays for the Cincinnati Bengals. Could you imagine him paired with Patrick Mahomes? Again, I don't think they need a clear number one playmaker like that, but I think because of this season, that's how this team is going to have to react. They are going to have to get Patrick Mahomes a clear number one wide receiver, because you can't go into next season with the same mess of receivers. Yes, they were able to win the Super Bowl last season without Tyreek Hill, but now I think they need to replace some of that playmaking. With Travis Kelce isn't getting any younger. You're only going to have him for maybe 3 to 4 more years before he's forced into retirement. You need to get Patrick Mahomes a playmaker. It doesn't need to be an elite one, but again, I think you need to react by trying to go after somebody like a T. Higgins. You need to improve this wide receiving group. The Philadelphia Eagles don't have that problem. They have not one but 2 star wide receivers. Their issues has been the consistency of quarterback Jalen Hurts, who has been good this season, not great. I think after his dynamic play in the Super Bowl, we all thought he would take that jump to elite quarterback level, compete for MVPs, and it just hasn't happened yet. Also, the team's defense is reeling. It's worth noting that the Eagles lost both of their coordinators this past offseason. I think we've come to a point where you can debate if the Eagles are even the best team in their own division with the Dallas Cowboys looming. I think we're at a point with Jalen Hurts where we're all wondering if he is a quarterback who has been elevated by what's around him instead of elevating the team itself. Like, is he a clear top 5 quarterback, or is he only playing in this amazing fashion because of the talent around him? And we were all super impressed by what he did in the Super Bowl. I mean, that was one of the best games by a losing quarterback we've ever seen. Hurts got that massive contract extension with the team, and with that comes the pressure of being a clear franchise quarterback, which I believe he is. My question mark is he the type of guy who's going to be a consistent MVP level quarterback? And he really hasn't been that this season. I think there have been flashes. I know he's gone through some injury issues, but he hasn't been that guy who played in that Super Bowl at all this season. They've been winning closer games. Last season, they were blowing people out. I know star receiver A.J. Brown was playing way better at the early start of the season than this second half. It's been kind of rough for him. My big issue for both of these teams, the Eagles and the Chiefs, is they did nothing this offseason to improve their team. Now, they didn't need to make drastic changes and bring in Pro Bowl talent, but they could have made minor, significant moves to make that next step. It feels like they just stayed where they were because they thought that they would remain one of the 2 best teams in the NFL. What they didn't think was going to happen, or it felt like they didn't think was going to happen, was that other teams around them would improve drastically, and that's what has happened. The other teams have gotten better, and I feel like they've just remained the same, and you can't do that in the NFL because the teams around them are reacting to their success. They are chasing the Eagles and the Chiefs, and I feel like at this point, the other teams have caught up with them. The other teams in the AFC are where the Chiefs are, and the other teams in the NFC are exactly where the Eagles were. The Eagles should have done something this offseason to improve their defense, and the Chiefs clearly should have gone after a dependable wide receiver who they can rely on from week to week. I mean, both of these teams' issues is glaring, and they did nothing to improve on their weaknesses this past offseason because, I get it, they had just made the Super Bowl. In the case of the Kansas City Chiefs, they've been a mini dynasty. So what did they really have to improve on? I feel like they've taken their own success for granted. I think sometimes we minimize how hard it is to get to the Super Bowl. We're used to star quarterbacks just getting to the Super Bowl no matter what because we've seen it from guys like Tom Brady. But I look at a guy like Peyton Manning. He was so good for so long, but he didn't always make the Super Bowl. It is hard to get there. Who knows? Maybe both of these teams can turn it around and both make the big game, but I don't see that happening because of the state of both of their conferences. Let's start with the AFC. The teams who I believe have a better chance of making the Super Bowl than the Kansas City Chiefs are the Baltimore Ravens. They have Lamar Jackson. He's playing at an elite MVP level. He has weapons around him. Who knows? Odell Beckham Jr. might elevate his game in the postseason. That's a guy who is a big game playmaker. I don't care what year it is, he has the chance to make a game-changing play. Another team I think the Kansas City Chiefs should worry about is the Miami Dolphins, who have one of the best offenses in the NFL. They have Mike McDaniel, their genius head coach. They have Tua Tagovailoa, and they have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, the type of playmakers that aren't on the Kansas City Chiefs right now. Does anyone believe that the Kansas City Chiefs can outscore the Miami Dolphins in a shootout. The only way the Chiefs can win that football game in the postseason is if it's a low-scoring game. I don't think the Kansas City Chiefs can stay up with the Miami Dolphins if it's a 35-point shootout. Advantage Miami Dolphins, as crazy as that sounds, I would give the advantage to the Dolphins. They are the clear better offense. And another AFC team that everyone is now more high on than the Kansas City Chiefs is the Buffalo Bills, who have Josh Allen. They have Stephon Diggs. They fired their offensive coordinator. They figured some things out. I think the Chiefs have to worry about every single team in the AFC postseason picture right now. They're not the clear favorites we all thought they were going to be. I mean, if Mahomes pulls this off and makes it to the Super Bowl and wins the Super Bowl, it will be one of the most impressive feats we've ever seen from a quarterback if he can win with what's around him. I just don't see that happening against the likes of the Dolphins, Ravens, and Buffalo Bills. All three of those teams have a better chance at making the Super Bowl than the Kansas City Chiefs, who are going to make the postseason. I just think they're going to get eliminated in the first or second round. And one of the biggest reasons I feel that way is because it's starting to get to Patrick Mahomes that he doesn't have talent around him at wide receiver. He was irritated after the loss to Buffalo. It just feels like he knows that he can't depend on these guys. And once it gets to that moment, how can I look at that team in that current situation and say the Kansas City Chiefs are Super Bowl bound? I just don't see how you can do it. I know all of those people out there are saying it's Patrick Mahomes. You can never count him out. And yes, I feel that way. He has a chance of winning any game he plays in. But still, how can you say the Kansas City Chiefs are the favorite to make the Super Bowl? You can't. They just don't have it this year. It doesn't feel like it's their year. They're going to have a rough loss in the postseason, and then they're going to have to react by getting Patrick Mahomes weapons to work with. On the other side, the Philadelphia Eagles are dealing with a team like the San Francisco 49ers, who on paper have everything. They have an elite defense. They have one of the best offenses with Brock Purdy. Who cares that he's Mr. Irrelevant? He's putting up ridiculous numbers with Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey. I don't see the Philadelphia Eagles competing with a team like that has everything. Kyle Shanahan, to me, is the best head coach in the NFL right now, and he's getting the absolute best out of his roster. And then the other team I think they should worry about is the Dallas Cowboys, who are coming off of a big win against the Philadelphia Eagles. They finally beat a legitimate opponent. Dak Prescott has never played better. He is playing at an MVP level I thought that Jalen Hurts would be playing at. It is clear that Dak Prescott has had a better season thus far than Jalen Hurts, and I never thought that was going to be the case after that Super Bowl. We all thought that Jalen Hurts would be the one playing like an MVP, but here we are. It's Dak Prescott playing like an MVP. He's using CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb looks like the best wide receiver in all of football right now. And I know people have their doubts about Mike McCarthy, but this is a guy who's won a Super Bowl. Yes, I know it was with Aaron Rodgers, but this Dallas Cowboys team has a legitimate shot to make a real run for it during this postseason. I believe they have a better chance than the Philadelphia Eagles. I look at both of these teams, the Chiefs and Eagles, and I say to myself, they're not complete football teams. They're relying way too heavily on their star quarterbacks. They're asking Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts to do way too much to barely squeak by and win football games. Neither one of these teams has looked dominant at all this season. The Eagles were riding high. They were winning close games. A.J. Brown was playing out of his mind, but he's tired out. Who knows what he's going to be like come postseason time, if they're going to be able to rely on him or not. And then with the Chiefs, they're barely beating the New England Patriots. I mean, that's a scary thing. The Patriots are one of the worst teams in all of football, and the Chiefs didn't look all that much better than them. Yes, they won the football game, and that's what matters, but at some point, these teams have to look like legitimate Super Bowl contenders for you to believe in them, and at no point this season have they. I think the Eagles have the better record, but they don't feel like a real Super Bowl contending team, and neither do the Kansas City Chiefs. The only reason we believe these teams are Super Bowl contenders is because of their quarterbacks and because of last season they faced off in the Super Bowl. You're never going to doubt the Kansas City Chiefs because they have Andy Reid, because they have Patrick Mahomes, but they're not playing like they have had in the past. Andy Reid is one of the best offensive coaches in all of football, but his offense this year is nothing spectacular. And the only chance the Chiefs have of winning the Super Bowl is if Patrick Mahomes plays out of his mind this postseason. And who can really predict that happening with what's around him? How can you look at what the Chiefs have on paper and say they're going to win the Super Bowl? I know a lot of people have compared the Chiefs to the 2018 Patriots. The Patriots that year had a better defense, and they were relying more on Rob Gronkowski that postseason. Yes, Mahomes has his version of Gronk and Travis Kelce, but that's a big ask for this defense to be able to stop the Ravens, Dolphins, and Bills in the postseason. I don't see that happening. I think the Chiefs' defense has played well, but they're not one of the better defensive units in all of football. I don't see them stopping the Bills, Dolphins, or even the Baltimore Ravens, who look unstoppable at this point. I get it. People are hesitant to choose Tua Tagovailoa, Josh Allen, or Lamar Jackson over Patrick Mahomes because none of those three have been to the Super Bowl. But my point is, and I believe this, either one of those three quarterbacks are going to make the Super Bowl, and Patrick Mahomes is not. The Kansas City Chiefs, as currently constructed, are not going to make a Super Bowl run. I just don't see how that's going to happen. Travis Kelce can have a great postseason, and so could Patrick Mahomes, and this team could still come up short. I think the Chiefs have a better chance, but they possibly have to face off against the best team in the NFL right now, the San Francisco 49ers. Both of these teams are just examples of how hard it is to get back to the Super Bowl. I mean, it's impossible to do. There hasn't been a repeat Super Bowl winner since the 2000 Patriots. It's just really hard to do. I am baffled about how the Chiefs have really done nothing to adjust to their situation. They're still playing the receivers who are letting them down, like Scanlon, like Tony. They're just letting those guys continue to play. I don't feel like Andy Reid has done the right thing. One of those two should have been benched at this point for not making those dependable plays that have been needed. I mean, you can't get benched for poor play. It's okay. So here's where I'm at with these two organizations. This year, I believe, is just a one-year fluke. I do believe these teams will be back because these teams will improve after this season's failure. Like I said with the Kansas City Chiefs, they're going to do anything and everything to surround Patrick Mahomes with talent. He's going to be openly frustrated this offseason. He's going to demand them to bring him a clear number one receiver, possibly even a number two. That wide receiver group is going to look drastically different next season. And in the case of the Philadelphia Eagles, they're going to improve their defense. And I believe Jalen Hurts is going to continue to improve to the point where at some point he's going to be a clear top 10 quarterback in the NFL. I believe he's been that at some points this season, but not as consistently as you'd like. He's still a young quarterback. He's still proving that he can be a clear franchise quarterback. I believe in him because of that Super Bowl. I believe that player is still there, and who knows, maybe he'll even make a run this postseason because that run came out of nowhere. Who knows, maybe he's the type of quarterback who just elevates his play in the biggest games. I do wonder if NFL fans even want these two teams to have a rematch. Last Super Bowl was a really good one. I believe the NFL loves parity. I think people want to see the San Francisco 49ers. Imagine a 49ers-Dolphins Super Bowl. I believe that would be the best possible matchup because those are clearly the two best offenses in all of football. To see Mike McDaniels versus Kyle Shanahan, the mentor-mentee relationship, that would be really exciting. Yes, I think Eagles-Chiefs would be a great Super Bowl yet again. You would have the Kelce brothers. Taylor Swift would be in attendance. You would have really high ratings. but the best possible matchup for me right now would be the Dolphins versus the 49ers, and I would give the clear advantage to the San Francisco 49ers. Right now, the chances of the Eagles and the Chiefs rematching look really bleak, but as the postseason arrives, things could change. Do I see the Chiefs and Eagles facing off again in the Super Bowl? Absolutely not. I don't think it's going to happen for either team. I think it's way too late in the season for the Chiefs to clean up their offense. And as for the Eagles, yes, if A.J. Brown goes back to playing like the beast he was in the early parts of the season, then yes, I could see Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown carrying the Eagles back to the Super Bowl. But the likelihood of that happening isn't very good right now. Thanks for listening to this edition of Head to Head. I'm Cam McKinney, and there'll be a new episode of the podcast every Monday on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So please rate, review, and subscribe.